What if one day, every major civilization you knew vanished? Cities gone, empires broken, trade routes silent, the lights of an entire age flickered out. That's exactly what happened about 3,200 years ago. Around 1200 BCE, the ancient world, from Greece to Egypt, suddenly unraveled. This was the Bronze Age collapse, the first globalized meltdown in human history. For centuries, historians blamed a single mysterious force, the Sea Peoples, raiders who appeared from beyond the horizon, burning cities, toppling kingdoms, their origins unknown. But as archaeology advanced, a more complex and more human picture emerged. Because it wasn't one catastrophe, it was everything all at once. A perfect storm that shattered the world's first international system. Climate change. Across the Mediterranean, pollen and sediment cores tell a silent story. Rivers shrank, fields turned to dust. Decades of relentless drought gripped the land. Harvests failed, famine followed. When crops die, kings lose their power. And when food disappears, the social fabric begins to tear. Earthquakes. The eastern Mediterranean rests on restless ground. Beneath the Aegean and Anatolian coasts, fault lines twisted violently. Collapsed walls, tilted foundations, entire palaces reduced to rubble. To the people of that time, it must have felt like the gods themselves were angry. Internal revolts. Even the most powerful kingdoms can fracture from within. Clay tablets from Ugarit in Egypt speak with desperation. Shortages of grain, workers fleeing their posts, rebellions flaring in the countryside. The machinery of empire began to seize up from inside. And then came the Sea Peoples. Inscriptions carved by Pharaoh Ramses III describe chaotic sea battles. Ships colliding, arrows in flame, waves filled with wreckage. But perhaps these invaders were not pure destroyers. Perhaps they were survivors too displaced by the same famine and turmoil that gripped everyone else. Each of these pressures, drought, quakes, revolt, migration, could have tested a civilization on its own. Together, they became a cascade failure. Trade collapsed. Diplomacy vanished. In less than a century, the network that connected Greece, Anatolia, Syria, Egypt, and Mesopotamia simply stopped working. The Mycenaean Greeks disappeared. The Hittite Empire crumbled into silence. Even Egypt, though it survived, emerged permanently weakened. For the first time in recorded history, the world experienced a globalized systems crash. Trade routes that had thrived for centuries dissolved overnight. Ships stopped sailing. Tin and copper, the lifeblood of bronze, became impossible to obtain. Without metal, armies disarmed, economies froze. Bronze, once the metal that defined progress, suddenly became a memory. It was as if civilization itself had forgotten how to speak. For some regions, this was a true dark age. Populations shrank, palaces emptied, writing systems vanished. Art and architecture fell silent. A long stillness settled. Centuries where knowledge was preserved only in fragments and memory. But collapse is not the same as extinction. History doesn't stop, it changes shape. From the ruins, new cultures rose. The Phoenicians became the navigators of a new age, sailing farther and faster than ever before, rebuilding the arteries of trade that once connected empires. In the highlands of Canaan, the Israelites emerged, A people forged in displacement whose faith and stories would echo across millennia. And in Greece, scattered communities rebuilt slowly, learning again to craft, to write, to govern. Those humble villages would one day become Athens, Sparta, and the cradle of classical thought. So the Bronze Age collapse was not merely an ending, it was a reset. It teaches us two enduring lessons. First, global systems are fragile. The late Bronze Age world was deeply interconnected, a web of trade, diplomacy, and mutual dependence. When drought struck one region, its consequences rippled across thousands of miles. When supply chains broke, entire economies faltered. It was the first time humanity learned how tightly woven its fate could be. Sound familiar? Today, our world is bound together by trade, data, and shared technology. When stresses align, climate, war, scarcity, inequality, the system itself can bend or break. Second, collapse is never final. Empires fall, systems fail, but people endure. They adapt, innovate, and create again. Every civilization carries within it the seeds of renewal. The Bronze Age collapse was the world's first great systems failure. A profound reminder that progress is not a straight line. Sometimes it loops back, pauses, or begins again from the ashes. Yet it's also proof of resilience, because after everything fell apart, humanity did what it has always done. It rebuilt, stone by stone, word by word, ship by ship, until the light returned. And maybe that's the true legacy of the Bronze Age collapse. Not the fall, but the rebirth that followed. Because even after the storms, civilization found its voice again. And as long as we remember that, so will we.